So there is the capability there. I mean, I have been having fewer plugged cigars lately. I don't know whether that's, I don't know what that's about.
Mm.
I'm certainly not going to, I'm certainly not going to say that that's, you know, all these days are behind us. But I think that's also probably because there are fewer cigars around.
Yeah, there is that. And I guess that's what people will hope with the price tag is that that allows for more cigars to be produced potentially, or do you think that there's value in keeping the supply low?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not. I mean, I think.
And the emergence of China, of course, makes a big difference.
Well, the fact that they've, I believe they have taken an interest in it, and obviously China has changed the world, just as previous generations of consumers have changed the world. I mean, if you look at the mid-century, it was America that was the, you know, the stereotypically rich person was the American on the kind of tour of Europe buying things, you know. Before that, it was the Englishman. I mean, you know, so that I think that these successive waves of affluent consumers in search of the best always have a change, always have impact, always change the world, always change the way things are understood, and you know that it is sort of unknowable what's going to happen. I mean, I presume what's going to happen is what's happened with watches and what's happened with wine, is that people like me will be priced out of the market.
Okay.
Happily, I was able to purchase 1 or 2 boxes over the last however many years it's been, 30 odd years, that would probably see me out and probably max out as well. But yeah, I mean, but then it's always been changing. And don't forget, it's only a few cigars. I mean, it's Cohiba, which is a premium brand. Do you know what I mean? It's the sort of, if you like to think of these things, it's like a Patek, or it's like a certain type of Hermes handbag or something like this. It's a totem. You know, it's a cultural totem. I mean, this band, it's you don't have to look at it. You don't have to even see the lettering to know what it is.
Yeah.
You know, you can recognize it across the street.
Yes.
And that is always the clue to the sort of totem brands. I think they will have more trouble elevating, because Trinidad was a premium brand. It was the kind of, it was when these became mainstream, Trinidad was what was the diplomatic gift. And then they made that mainstream, and for a while it was at a relatively high price point, and it had things like the 50 ring gauge double Robusto format, the Robusto Extra, which was for many years my ultimate favorite Havana cigar.
Yes.
Then they discontinued that with that sort of wonderful wisdom that as soon as it's good, they discontinue it. You know, it's the Flor de Cano short Churchill all over again. Do you know what I mean? Everybody suddenly discovers it and jumps on the bandwagon. And that's what I love, is the capriciousness that decides, great, everybody's going for it. Right, now's the time to kind of switch it off.
Yeah.
And I mean, I just applaud that sort of idiosyncratic and eccentric way of doing things. But Cohiba, I mean, people are going to pay anything for Cohiba. That has been demonstrated. You know, they'll have more of a problem elevating Trinidad, re-elevating Trinidad. It's much harder to bring something back up when you purposefully sort of made it a different level. And I mean, you could have, I mean, hindsight is a marvelous thing, but you could have introduced it as a different flavor profile, but with an equal kind of level of prestige as the Cohiba. But that wasn't done for whatever reasons at the time. And you know, I mean, anybody who takes my advice on anything is utterly insane. So you know, that's the health warning. But the new Romeo, which I rather like, the Linea de Oro, I think that's got great potential. But again, whether you can elevate that to a super premium level, I don't know. They've got a nice box. They've got a nice, the cigars that I've seen, and they're very, very few. I've got a few that I got in Cuba on my last visit just before COVID, and then a couple have trickled out. All look beautiful.
Yes.
And I like the double band. I like the foot band, which is nice. You know, they're good cigars. There is also the Monte, what you know, you and whichever one it is, what is the Prestige Monte
The
called
Linnea 1935.
yeah, that
Yeah,
one, which
yeah.
I'm not. I mean, the only reason I don't remember it
There's
particularly
the
was
Dumas and the,
yeah, and
there's
the
a couple. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, neither of us particularly care for that one greatly. So I mean, again, I based purely on sort of personal prejudice. I can't really see that one taking off, but maybe it will. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, again, they take care. They take care with making it. It's a carefully made thing. It's a quality thing, and also I find it very troubling when I see people disrespecting cigars because, like you, I'm familiar a little with the culture that goes into them, and somebody's put effort into growing this stuff, maturing the leaf, and then to have somebody disrespect it or to sort of just stub it out, I hate that. You know?
Yes, I quite agree. It's sort of no different to a watchmaker making a watch in that sense. Is that they're putting their sort of their experience and their passion and their skill into creating something for you, and I don't necessarily expect everybody to know what an escapement is, but at the same time, you treat it with care.
Well, I think I would hate to sound pompous, but I do quite a lot of the time anyway. So I wouldn't really. I don't. I mean, I think that's a sort of.
Please do. That's what we're here for.
It's a vain hope. It's a vain hope. But I mean, I think there is a duty of you to understand a bit what it is you're kind of, to show the respect to the culture that you're entering by actually beginning to understand a bit of it, rather than just being able to kind of post something on a social media forum that will demonstrate your plutocracy, or you know.
But do you? But yes, I think that's interesting though, because I think that kind of democratization of things like cigars or wine, you know, the ability of very young people, it seems, to be able to post pictures of a bottle of wine saying that.
But it's not democratizing it. I mean, it's actually the other way. It's just a different kind of elite. Do you know what I mean? It's no longer old codgers like me. I mean, you know, I mean, I wouldn't have ever aspired to those lofty heights of sort of drinking Cheval Blanc with my breakfast anyway. But I mean, that's no longer an economic possibility for people like me, but it is for, and there is something wonderful about that exuberance of these kind of young people coming in and throwing themselves into it. Some of these people, I mean, I hesitate to use national stereotypes, but there is that kind of facility for a sort of assimilation of knowledge that I find in Chinese enthusiasts of many things that puts my kind of gradually accumulated knowledge derived from interest rather than from approaching it like an O-level or GCSE or whatever it is. That puts my kind of rather more dilettantish knowledge to shame.
Yeah.
Because they're able to say, well, this is this leaf and it's grown and it comes sort of 73 centimeters from the ground, and it extended to a length of this, and it was harvested by a bloke called Manuel who'd had he'd had a sort of chorizo sausage for breakfast that morning, and therefore he picked it with an extra vigorousness that sort of you'll see with the flavor. And I just say, I just in awe. Do you know what I mean? Because I can learn from that. You know.
At the same time, you are the author of Cigars, a guide.
This is one of my 3 books on cigars. It's the only one really worth reading, I think.
May I say to all subscribers of Cigar Keep that is not true. You should get all 3 if you can get your hands on them, because I believe that sort of Nick Foulkes' books that are older than 10 years old are actually quite hard to get a hold of. I've been trying to get a hold of Dancing into Battle for a very long time, to no avail, despite the fact that I even know the author.
I can give you a rare unsigned copy.
Yeah. When you made that book, firstly, that's going to be an entry point for these people who wanted to educate themselves on cigars. But tell me a bit more about the actual process of making that book, the kind of, perhaps an anecdote of what you learned while making it, you know, the sort of research that went into it.
It was more setting down what I'd learned and what it was part. I mean, I chose the thing Cigars, a Guide, because that is sort of what it is. It's like a vade-mecum. You kind of travel with me through this land, and I am your kind of cicerone or whatever they're called. But I wanted to convey, first of all, what I have not necessarily learned, but what I have learned to love about cigars. And I wanted to communicate my enthusiasm. I wanted to communicate my respect. I wanted to communicate something of the cultural context that gave birth to it, and hopefully give it more dimension than this is made with this leaf and the flavor profile is this, and don't have it if it's got. There's something myopic about this culture of luxury goods that, especially for men, focuses on largely cosmetic details. For example, on watches, a simple way of lettering something will affect the value. I mean, the lettering on the dial will affect the value in an exponential way. And I wanted to create this sort of rounded world, and with suggestions, with my subjective observations on certain things, with an A to Z glossary, with a historical introduction, with detail about the brands, with some sort of appendices giving you limited editions, giving you the vitolas, giving you all these things, so that it would be something that if you wanted to, you could refer to it.
Yep.
Hopefully it would give you pleasure to read actually at a sitting if you wanted to read it. And also it would be it's a sort of very basic, it's like a sort of one of those sort of phrase books that you used to get before you went to France. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sort of, and then you could decide which bits you wanted to enlarge upon. So I mean, really, I wrote it from I wouldn't say I wrote it for Max, but I mean, he read it and he said, just when I want to know something and I wonder why I haven't mentioned it, I turn the page and there it is.
Yeah.
So I felt that I've done my job well, because he's not a great reader, Max, and he's reading a bit more now. He's not a bad writer, actually. And
indeed, he's done some rather
he's
lovely
good.
pieces
Yeah,
for
he's
Cigar
done some very nice pieces, and I'm very proud of him, seeing him do those. But that's because of only he could write those from his point of view. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's somebody who has that slightly rounded experience, certainly a kind of a lifetime's experience around the world of cigars, not necessarily as a cigar lover, but as somebody associated. You know, he's known Edward since he was a couple of weeks old.
Yes, gosh, that's amazing. And I think that furthermore, there's a need for, well, there are very few people who are a sort of an educational resource for cigars. I think if anyone wanted to get into cigars, turning to, you couldn't open the Telegraph today or any magazine and find something on cigars. It's actually quite tricky to find. So something that is a resource that is kind of constant, that they can have on their bookshelf. And I noticed Dominic doesn't quite have it in this one, but sorry, we can't mention the proprietor. Must cut that. But I think that there is a need for people who want to learn about cigars to have a kind of an educational resource.
I mean, I'm all for people buying my book, don't get me wrong.
No,
but
yeah,
I think actually it's money reasonably well spent.
I agree.
It's not a bad book. I had fun writing it, and I hope it conveys. I mean, it doesn't quite explain why nothing explains anything totally, but I mean, I hope it gives you an insight into what I like.
Yes.
And why I like it.
Speaking of that, just to sort of round things off, could you tell me what your favourite cigar of all time is?
God, it's difficult. Could be the Partagas Series de Reserva, which was a fantastic cigar. Could be the 1966. Could be the Sublime. Punch and Infas, obviously, is a great cigar. Hoya du Gourmet, if you can find a good one, is fantastic. Siglo Fours I used to love. I mean, I could rattle on. I could find reasons, but this is what's so good about cigars, is you could find reasons to sort of speak for all of them. You know what I mean? There is no reason, and it's not. It's a bit like saying, not quite like saying which of your children do you prefer, but or which of your suits do you prefer? I mean, it's a bit like saying, what's your favorite suit? And you say it depends if it's warm or cold. If it depends if I'm in France or in England. If it depends if I'm in the country or in the town. It's the same with cigars.
Yes, I guess that's true.
I mean, I can't. I mean, I can say the ones I've loved, and I could be here most of the rest of the day prattling on about that.
Do you have a sort of a memory in mind that reminds you of why it is how you love cigars so much?
Occasionally, I'll taste something, like the Robusto Supremos I had the other night, or like I came across a very old Siglo 6 that I had from the year of introduction. Came across a box of those, and you just set fire to it, and without expecting to, are completely reminded of, this is why I got into cigars. There's this overall feeling. It's the moment. It's also all the rigmarole. I love the gear, you know.
Yeah. That's part of
And I
it.
mean, that's one of the reasons I continue, is that I can have more kind of tinsel, you know. Like, I like the fact that I can have a chain through my pocket with a cigar cutter on the end. I got Max a beautiful Sam de Rock 9-carat gold Dunhill one from 1967.
Amazing.
Which and it's great because it's in for the slim ring gauge, so he loves it, and he appreciates what that is,
Yes.
which is really nice, and it's nicer than the one I got. And I said to Edward, I said, maybe I shouldn't have given him because it's too nice. And he said, and Edward, being so wise, said, my father always used to say, when he gave me something, he said, I can either have the pleasure of watching you enjoy it while I'm alive, or when I'm dead. And he's probably not going to enjoy it. He's probably not going to be able to derive any pleasure from something when he's dead. So he has the pleasure of seeing his son enjoy something while he's around, to see him enjoy it. And Max...
It's a much nicer version of "There's no wallet in a shroud," isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's also the character of the man. I mean, when I say about Edward that I used to ask him what he did with his old suits, and he said, well, he gave them to the refugees. Oh, you charity thing. And I said, well, that's very good. And he said, what I do is I always put $100 in the inside pocket, so that the guy who gets the suit in some refugee camp puts his hand inside the suit and picks out $100. That's the character of the man.
Yes.
And, you know, if that man is a cigar smoker, I mean, he is one of the best examples. I mean, if you ask why I got into cigar smoking, it was my father-in-law, who's a wonderful man, my stepfather-in-law. And then also people like Edward. It just, you can't really explain why. But I spend my life trying. I wish we did more. There was a time when I used to do more cigar journalism, and I've sort of let that slip a bit. And I suppose the excitement of doing these films with Max and Freddie, my two sons, viewer, has sort of not lured me away from the sort of the written word, but it's given me another dimension, and also I think people like that as well as the written stuff, you know.
Yeah. And I think what's really nice, you know, with this video in particular, is a lot of people who are on Cigar Keep will have read your writing and will know your opinions on things, but not necessarily know too much about you. And I think that one of the great privileges of being a journalist and doing what you do and covering what you've covered is you have gotten to experience and had often first glance at things that people often don't get to see at all, and you've been part of the process to some extent. Because
I remember when I went to see the first barn where they made the first, where they were storing the tobacco for the first reservas before the first reservas were made. That was a great moment. I tasted the Partagas Series D Reserva before they'd banned it and boxed it. That was a great moment. I mean, there have been many great moments that you think, and you go into I go into a shop, and the same with watches or something like this. I go into, and I know I derive quite a great deal of satisfaction from knowing things about it. It's like coming across somebody and I know about you. Do you know what I mean? And I know why I like you because of this, and this, and
yes.
Other people necessarily won't. And there is a sort of, I suppose I like finding things out and I like knowing about things. And that is the satisfaction in that I can go in and derive greater enjoyment from something by knowing what went into making it.
Yeah, it's a new thing, so to be able to have you being our first interview is a real pleasure, and I really appreciate you coming along to talk to us.
It's extremely kind of you, Tom. I'm very flattered, honoured, grateful, and just happy that you're doing something that I can understand. It makes, being a very relatively simple mind, it's quite good to have something quite straightforward, you know, like cigars. And if you want to know a bit about cigars, visit Cigar Keep, buy my book. Thank you, Tom.
That's a wrap. Thank you.